is expanding the conversation around the world of fintech, or what you call financial technology, but what's the legal environment around this new buzzword across everyone here? So from a Nigeria corporate and commercial law firm, Banwo Negotalo is Issa, who is a member of the FinTech Association of Nigeria. These are the guys who are talking about this. So let's continue from where we stop about the central bank and the NCC. Yes.
And then you need to have the NSE and the...
Okay, well, and the SEC.
and the
SEC.
Because one of the unique characteristics of fintech products is that they cut across different regulatory jurisdiction. So, indeed, one of the questions you get asked by typical fintech company is, who am I meant to get approval from? Is it the NCC, or is it the CBN, or is it the SEC, or is it the three of them? Indeed, there's a certain products that you have that exposes you to these 4 different regulators.
Interesting.
Which underscores the importance of the need for a specific, unique regulatory framework for fintech products. And I'll take a step back. You know, when telecom companies started providing some form of service, payment service, the question was, if you do transfers from your phone, you are using service of MTN. At times, this is done through the framework of MTN, a telecoms company. The question is that who is MTN's regulator? The NCC.
The NCC.
Yes. Indeed, the question then became opposite that. Do we also need to, does MTN need to go and obtain the license, a banking license also? And which was a valid question around the time. What the CBN did then, I remember when they issued the regulation on mobile money transfers, was to create 2 different regimes. They had the bank-led regime, which was being driven by the bank, and they had the non-bank-led regime, which was mainly then to create a framework for telecom companies to also be able to do money transfers, of course, as part of a consortium that also involved them leveraging on some banks. Now, what that essentially means in terms for fintech companies is that you then have a situation where some of them would have to still go to the NCC. Like, for instance, the value-added services licensing framework for the NCC that you need to get that license for you to be able to provide such kind of services. So, even though you are a telecoms company, you need to go and get some license from the CBN to provide services that goes beyond making calls. The moment you transfer.
But if a bank is also put up a team to provide such technology, they need to talk to NCC as well.
Exactly.
So this overarching or regulatory framework, you think there should be one? It doesn't exist as at the moment.
It doesn't. So you have a possibility where a fintech company has to possibly obtain licenses from the NCC, from the CBN. If you're not careful, then you have to go to SEC.
So the remitter, TSA issue now comes in. We discussed MMM earlier, but this is now between the remitter. If we look at the TSA, for example, the central bank says, hey, hold on a second. This money is called the TSA is in the banks. But you guys bring in technology to take it out to the government. Well, no problem. TSA or remitter people step forward, right?
Correct.
Because you are now operating and using your technology to do business in my jurisdiction.
Correct.
And then we got some issues 2 years ago thereabout about who should pay for what, and you have the National Assembly stepped in. Then the whole thing became a little bit muddy between the NCC, the central bank, and the National Assembly says whether we should probe whatever it was. So this is one of a typical example of the regulatory issue we have.
Yes, and clearly there's an engagement that is being done. Luckily, there's a presidential intervention on this matter also.
Or the TSA?
Not just on the TSA. Around these general issues around fintech regulations.
Oh, tell me.
So there are conversations being had at the level of regulators that operate in the financial services industry that have 1 or 2 places inside, in order to find ways to ensure that there is some form of alignment in terms of how to deal with the different products that are coming into the market, in order to avoid the kind of issues we've had in the past around which regulator does a particular service provider need to speak with? And to avoid some form of grabs here and there, everybody's trying to make themselves relevant. But at the same time, you cannot allow a situation where different regulators, the NCC is coming after you, the CBN wants to see you, the Securities and Exchange Commission is saying you can't do this. Whilst all of them have their different remits and what actually they are trying to protect the consumer against, the fact still remains that there are ways this can be done to make it more efficient, both for the regulator themselves and for companies who are trying to come into this space. The licensing framework, for you to get a license from the CBN, can be quite expensive. Now, if I pay so much money for the CBN, do I have to go and pay another money to the SEC? If that would potentially make it difficult for us to run some of these fintech products.
Yeah, well, some of our viewers are getting interested in this conversation on social media and on Twitter. Obizi is asked the question. He says the key issues for you fintech folks will be cyber attack, custody of funds, investment guidelines, and money laundering.
Yes, and those are the key. Those are very fundamental questions that we get continuously asked in the fintech ecosystem, and which again underscores the importance of getting our regulatory regime right. All these issues continue to be of importance to the government in terms of protecting an average investor out there. Whether we like it or not, people who have genuine products, genuine fintech products, to make available to make life easier for an average Nigerian. There are people who are also going to explore the system, to exploit the system, to create problems for people who are not educated, which is where the regulator comes in, which is where the guidelines around investment protection, anti-money laundering, providing an investment, a security, some form of security structures that protects the interest of an average Nigerian becomes critical. And these are conversations that
do we need Consumer Protection Council in the loop?
Definitely. And they have, now, if you look at the Consumer Protection Council and the framework under which they operate, this is clearly something that it's important to them. But unfortunately, again, it's more reactionary. The CPC, it's more reactionary in terms of how some of these things are done. So you actually have to, most of the time, you have to go and file a complaint. Most of the time, people have to file a complaint that, okay, there's this particular product. The CPC itself would not, first, they don't have the capacity, then it's going to be expensive. They don't have the capacity to look at every product that is available for Nigerians out there and see whether this one is going to be injurious or
against the law,
or create some problems for an average Nigerian.